You know, as humans, we're just like little kids leaving fingerprints on the glass table. I remember growing up, my mother had these glass tables, and we just had to use a glass cleaner and get an old shirt or, a cloth towel, and we would clean them, dust them off, because no one wants to see fingerprints on their nice glass table. But as humans, we leave fingerprints behind on those that we interact with. Whether we're even close to somebody, have a strong relationship with them, we're still leaving fingerprints behind. We're leaving an impression on those we interact with. So my question is, what type of impression are we leaving behind? Remember, I'm a teacher, not a speaker. So there's a field of science known as dendrochronology. And with this, it's an actual technique that dendrochronologists use, and they're able to date events or environmental changes that happened in different areas around the country. So what they do is they study a tree, like the tree rings. If I were to cut a tree in half, most of us know that we're going to actually see rings. Those represent the annual growth rings of that tree, because every year a tree develops or grows another layer. So there's another ring. So I could actually count those rings to determine how old that tree is. However, with dendrochronology, I could look at environmental changes, or I could identify environmental changes by looking at the width of each of those rings, because they're not all the same. If I were to look at a ring and see the rings that are thicker, I could then determine, hey, that year, that tree probably had a nice spring, it had a mild winter, a lot of rain, so it got a lot of nourishment, so that ring was thicker. But when I see the thinner rings, I could then determine that, hey, there was most likely a harsher winter, a shorter summer, maybe there was a drought or limited water. And sometimes dendrochronologists have even seen a black ring, okay? And that black ring means that, hey, there was a forest fire in that area that charred the bark of the trees. But once again, the tree did not die. So that's a whole nother lesson within itself. And what a scientist could do is they could count back the rings. So they could start with the current ring and then count back, let's say, 50 rings, if it's a larger tree, of course. And they could look at the width of that ring and determine what was the environmental conditions, what was the rain, what was the weather, and they could determine the way that events took place. I say that all to say that there's an impression left on that tree, okay? Did it receive a lot of nourishments? Was the climate ideal, or was it climate harsh? Or was it something that was almost detrimental, like a fire? Just like that tree, those almost represent the individuals that we interact with on a daily basis. I share that once again as a teacher, not a speaker, and I'm taking this moment to just focus on a young man who unfortunately lost his life due to an act of violence, November 1st, 2022. His name was Kirshnik Ball. Now, his family and fans knew him as Kirshnik Ball, or at least knew who that was, but his name was Takeoff. He was a part of the world famous rap group Amigos, and it hit close to home because my wife is also a teacher, and we were watching the news, and she was impacted because once she heard the name, we knew Takeoff, or the world knew Takeoff, but then when she heard the name Kirshnik Ball, more specific, she instantly went back to her class. At the time, she taught fourth grade. This was about 19 years ago, and Kirshnik Ball was her student, so she was his fourth grade teacher, and she immediately made that connection, like this was a young man in my class. She didn't even know that Takeoff was her student. She just knew him as Kirshnik Ball. It was unfortunate that he lost his life. However, my wife definitely had peace in knowing while she interacted with him, she knew the impression that she left behind, that she left for him. She was big on developing the whole student, helping them to become the best version of them, helping Kirshnick to become the best version of him, along with his classmates. And I want us to just reflect, how are we interacting with those that we come in contact with, whether we know them or not? How do we affect the growth rings of their tree? Are we nourishing? Are we providing what they need? Are we creating the environment or the ideal climate? Or are we being harsh, cold, stingy with our kindness? Because we are leaving an impression behind, whether we know it or not. Remember, I'm a teacher, not a speaker. Y'all have an amazing day.